Taoiseach, yesterday I raised with you the scandal of big energy companies shamelessly ripping off and gouging households. And I outlined how the latest report from the International Energy Agency highlights that Irish energy bills are 3 times higher than the wholesale cost of energy. The cost of energy has dropped significantly since 2022, but these companies are not passing on savings to hard-pressed customers. Instead, they pocket the savings to boost their own massive profits. Proof of Irish households being so blatantly ripped off should provoke the head of government into action, determined to rein in these companies. So I asked you a very straight question. What will you do to end this rip-off? And in response, you offered absolutely nothing. Having already withdrawn energy credits, you now shrug your shoulders as households are taken for a ride and as more than 1 million households face big hikes in their electricity bills this month. People are very worried. I spoke with one woman last night who's at her wit's end. She and her husband have 3 kids. They both work and they are worn out from paying rip-off bills. This woman is up to 90, wondering how she'll afford increased electricity bills this winter. And she told me that she fears they'll go into arrears and that they might face being cut off because she simply doesn't have €1 to spare. I was contacted recently by another mother. Her husband works full-time. She says the unaffordable cost of childcare prevents her from working, but this is what she wrote to me. She said, "Our ESB bill became so high over the past 2 years that we were left with no choice but to switch to a prepay system, just to ensure the electricity wasn't cut off. I am extremely worried now as we face winter. We can't afford oil to heat our home. We are drowning in bills and we are struggling to stay afloat." Taoiseach, this is what the rip-off means in real life, and you allow it to happen. In other EU states, governments ensure that their regulators have full oversight of the hedging practices of energy companies, but your government is happy to take companies at their word. That is weak and at best naive. We produced a bill that would provide the regulator with such powers. We've been raising this matter for the past 3 years. You should, of course, implement this legislation and start putting manners on these companies. Tá Fianna Fáil agus Fine Gael sásta sí siar, tada a dhéanamh agus liginstas na cólachtaí fuinneamh las a winch as teaghlaí na hÉireann. Dúiltaíonn an rialtas seo seasamh son oibrithe agus teaghlaí agus i gcoinne an sal fuinneamh. In almost every other EU state, the drop in wholesale cost of energy is being passed on to the customer. Households are getting a break, but it's not happening here. This disinterested, out-of-touch approach from government can't continue, Taoiseach. Yesterday you said that you recognise and accept that there is price gouging happening. Back in July, when you were challenged here on the floor of the Dáil, you said, "We have the guts to take on anybody who is engaged in price gouging." Absolutely. But so far, this government has been gutless. So you're the head of government. Do your job. And can you please tell households what exactly you will do to protect them from this blatant gouging and this blatant profiteering?
Díon téim leis an méadtá ráite ag an heachta. Mar leis an méadtá dhéanamh ag an rialtas ó thaobh an diasca an bhrú. Atá a chosfaointe na tíre mar leis an ordú san costas marachtála agus ad a bhíam. Ghuill ardú ann go háire gursaí bia agus cuasaí fuinnimh. Agus tá cinenne dénta an rialtas, cáir agus takeíocht a chóirt do dhaoine incom ísle agus atá ag brath leasa hóisílig. Just want to say at the outset that the government is very, very conscious of the enormous pressure on people on the ground in respect of cost of living increases that have occurred over the last number of years, and particularly the elevated food prices, relative to previous times, and energy prices. And that is why in the budget we moved to take a number of key decisions to reduce pressure on a number of families, and particularly low-income families and those who depend on social protection, and families more generally, because you know that historically the VAT rate was at 13.5% for gas and electricity. And in the budget, we reduced it to 9%, and now we've made that applicable up to 2030. So it'll stay at 9% for the next 5 years. That comes with considerable cost, but we have to do it, otherwise prices would be up even higher. And we've increased the fuel allowance to 38 euros a week, and that's a 15% increase. And that will give an additional 140 euros to over 460,000 recipients. And that we've expanded that payment to include those in receipt of the working family payment. So we haven't stood back. We've been very conscious in our budgetary measures to try and protect those most in need from the effects of energy price increases, which we acknowledge and which are difficult in themselves. We've also have a very significant retrofitting budget, which does help those who benefit from that in terms of their household energy bill. About 558 million euro has been allocated this year for residential and community energy schemes, and particularly the Warmer Home Scheme, about 280 million. These are very significant sums and resources that have been allocated to get households, the energy costs down. About 8,000 energy upgrades in low-income households happened as a result of the Warmer Home Scheme. And then in previous years, yes, we did universal energy credits. We've been criticised for the high level of public expenditure. You want to go another 4 or 5 billion, which would add 2% to inflation, which would increase cost of living for people. We know we're about the 8th highest in terms of electricity prices across the European Union 27, adjusted for purchasing power parity. The Minister has met with the companies, and we don't want anyone in arrears will be helped. People will be helped and assisted who are in arrears outside if they're in higher income thresholds. We have a regulator in this country, the CRU. They've published a report in 2023. They're very conscious of the hedging policy. They argue, and it's the CRU, not me, are arguing that when prices went up, the hedging impacted beneficially. But it is slow coming back down, and companies should reduce the prices and should reflect much more quickly the wholesale price reductions. And the Minister will continue to engage with those companies. And what has to happen overall is the system has to change, and he has set up a group to change the regulatory framework, and we have to do it also with the European Union, because gas has been the price setter. That is the fundamental issue. The overall regulatory framework across Europe that governs the price of energy.
So wholesale prices are down considerably by over 70%, and that reduction isn't being passed on. So bills are rising. Energy companies are profiteering, turning huge profits, and government is sitting idly by. Families and workers are struggling and struggling hard, and government sits idly by. Too lily-livered, or maybe too indifferent to bother to intervene and take this on. You acknowledged yesterday, I noticed your language is rather more watery today, but you accepted yesterday that blatant gouging is occurring, blatant profiteering. You surely accept that families are struggling in the midst of a cost of living crisis. And I want to know what you're going to do about it. You're not a commentator, you're not some passive bystander, you are the Taoiseach, you are the head of government. Tell me how you will put a stop to this blatant gouging and profiteering. Tell me the precise actions that you propose to take, Taoiseach.
Again, look, you're operating from a prepared script, and that's very obvious because I've just outlined the measures that we have taken. I've just outlined the measures that we've taken to help people, particularly those on low incomes, which I'm sure you agree with, by the way. I'm sure you acknowledge that the increases in the fuel allowance, the expansion of it into the working family payment cohort, the reduction of the VAT to 9% on a more for the next 5 years. I'm sure you welcome all of that and acknowledge that those are decisions that the government has taken. And we will continue to help people in particular who are in difficulty here. Well, I think, sorry, with the greatest respect, no, you think you live in the real world, but there are times when I think you live in a political bubble. And you shouldn't be casting aspersions on other people in the House, okay? We all come from backgrounds, by the way. I know exactly what the real world is all about, and I engage with people all of the time. But I'm telling, with respect to your, I mean, all along on the energy crisis, the proposals that you came forward with, particularly during the energy crisis, after the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, would have been catastrophic what you proposed at the time. Would have been catastrophic. And you want us now to do more to underpin the companies. You want us to support the companies further and further and further.